Did she make it from some kind of driftwood or is the wood significant?
I think pallets.
Oh, yeah, good, yeah.
Yeah, she's handier than I am.
Oh, I wouldn't say that.
No.
Okay. Let me get my, if I can stand.
Oh.
My bum over, a pillow over. Go. My pillow.
Didn't we start Job before?
Yeah.
Yeah, we got to what, the third? I'm only on the second chapter. Yeah.
I don't remember. I probably forgot what we learned, so.
Oh, yes, I hear ya. I hear ya.
What are you doing to keep busy, Pat?
Oh, my word. Trisha keeps me busy.
Oh, good.
Yeah, I've been doing prayer books and I've been doing a lot of scrapbooking stuff.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Good. Good.
Yep. Busy.
Good.
Don't go anywhere but to the grocery store, maybe in the post office.
Yeah. Trader Joe's once a week.
Yeah. Oh.
Dixons, it is so nice to see your faces.
Yeah,
I
we're
really,
here.
really missed you guys.
I'd like to see your mouth moving.
What are you doing and how are you holding up?
We're doing fine.
We're doing great.
We're healthy. I'm nursing a fractured foot, but other than that, we're fine.
Ooh,
How did that
ow.
happen?
You know, there was just a little raised piece of concrete and I turned my foot. It just broke the ligaments and fractured that foot bone.
Yeah.
It's called a Jones
Fracture.
A Jones fracture, and basketball players frequently will have it because when they go up, then they come back down. They land on somebody's foot.
Oh, yes. Off kilter.
Yeah, that's a bummer.
Yeah, I'm non-weight bearing with the scooter for 6 weeks. And then if I have to have surgery, it's another 8 to 12 weeks non-weight bearing.
Oh,
my.
no.
I know.
So prior to the fracture, we hiked probably at least half the hiking trails in Spokane County.
Not anymore.
Uh-oh.
How do you like your new house?
Like it a lot, very much.
And
this is
neighborhood?
great now since I'm on a scooter. It's wonderful because we're on one level. And
Oh,
we have
that
a little
makes a
bit bigger
difference.
rooms and a little bit more space. And so never bought a house looking for a scooter house, but this is it.
Oh, golly.
Hi, Pastor.
Hello.
Oh, hello, everybody. Yeah, I'm here at the church getting stuff set up. Good to see you guys both, and Pat too, and let's see, Kayla, and looks like Derek and Michelle are connecting there. Kelly's there. So yeah, there we go. I will share a screen, and I heard your updates there, so hope your foot gets better soon.
It's not a good one. It's in a portion of the foot. It's called zone 2, which does not get much blood flow to it.
Oh,
So it's kind of, but it's about a 75% chance it could heal.
do you have to like massage it or something to encourage?
It does not move. I'm in a boot up to my knee 24/7.
Oh, boy.
And
I sleep with it,
and
so
if-
I can't kick Jim in the night.
and if you try and massage it, it's a little bit uncomfortable for the owner of the foot.
Yes,
Go
yes.
with the touch.
That is understandable.
Yeah. Are there people at church, Pastor?
Yes, although only 2 at the moment. Jenna
Okay.
and her boyfriend. You guys want to say hi? And it was John? John, yeah. So There were a few more who said they would be here, so I don't know if they'll show up or not. Maybe decided it was too dark or too snowy. Yeah. But then we'll maybe see
Probably
them.
getting ready for Jeopardy.
That too. Is it
Oh, yeah.
Jeopardy Day?
That's what I
Are
would be doing.
Did you say Jenna? Pastor?
Yeah, Jenna.
Hi, Jenna.
Hi, is that Kayla?
Yeah.
Hello.
And I'm realizing, I thought my volume was fine on this computer, but it's really not that loud. So I'll have to figure that out next week. So they won't be able to hear you real well, but we'll figure it out. Let's see. Okay, the sours are there too. Good. Glad to see you guys.
All of a sudden, we looked at the clock and it was like,
Yeah.
You think you did?
Jim?
How do you think I feel? When it's 6:29 and I
It's like, oh,
don't have my computer on yet.
Oh, okay. Then I feel better.
Yeah. But I think we're ready to go. It's 5 minutes in, so we don't need to give people more time than that. So here, I'll just share the screen. Here is our Bible study handout, so you guys have it there too. And we'll start with a prayer and then get into it. My goal is to not take a full hour. I think I like, for stuff that's in the evening, I try to aim for 45 minutes. I feel like after a day's work, that's more what people can, handle. So that's kind of what we're shooting for. And does it show the handout on your screens now?
yeah.
Although I just went into some strange view why on earth? Okay.
Oh, I printed mine out, so I would have it.
Okay, good, yeah.
I won't have to do that though,
Yeah,
because I didn't.
am I in a strange view? Oh, okay, there we go. Yeah, I got it to look normal again. All right, we'll pray now. Dear Heavenly Father, thank you for this chance to get together and study your word. The book of Job has answers many difficult questions of life, where it gets us thinking about it and ultimately points us towards repentance and faith. Help us to learn a lot from this study. Be with us now, be with anybody else who's maybe just now remembering that they were going to attend the Bible study, and help them figure out how to get online. We ask this all in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
All right, so there's a lot to say about the book of Job. Many people who are not Christians, I'm probably talking louder than I need to, but a lot of people who, even like literary critics and authors and stuff like that, talk about Job as being kind of the literary masterpiece of the Bible. Not that it has the most, it wouldn't be our favorite book, because we'd probably pick something in the New Testament, maybe one of the Gospels focusing on Jesus. But people who just appreciate literature for literature's sake say that Job is a great book, because it's wrestling with the kind of deep questions of suffering and why does God allow suffering. And there's a lot of beautiful poetry in it. And it's kind of a long book. There's a lot of dialogue. There's one other thing about it that makes it unique. It's that there's a lot of people speaking, and what they're saying is wrong. And so usually in the Bible, you kind of assume that everything you're reading is accurate. It's good and right. But we're going to find there's this long dialogue where the friends in Job are arguing, and none of them really completely understand what's going on. And so there's a lot more room for analysis, and it's sometimes harder to pin down exactly the point that's being made. And sometimes you have to evaluate, is this accurate or is this not? So there's a lot of interesting aspects about it. And so that's why I think it's a good topic for a kind of longer study. But today we're just going to be looking at the introduction that sets the stage for the book. However, that's very important. Now, some of you, we already studied this, but it was about a year ago now. We were doing this for Thursday mornings, and I figured after a year, it's probably a good idea to go back. So it'll sound a little familiar, but we didn't get very far at all. So within a week or two, we'll be back to something you didn't look at in that Bible study. So who was Job? When did he live? And let's now set the stage. You can see. So I've got 3 notes here to look at. So the name Job, not this particular Job, but just as a name, just like the name John or Jenna or Aaron, it's used by multiple people, and it does actually appear outside the Bible. It's the name of the prince of Ashtaroth in Bashan, which is in like northeast Galilee, that in the Amarna tablets in 350 BC. It's the name of a Palestinian chief in an Egyptian text. That's about 2000 BC. And at Ugarit, this would be about 1400, a version of the name appears in a list of palace personnel. So it's not an unheard of name, and that doesn't really tell us a lot. Here is what they thought about Job in ancient Alexandria, Egypt, in about the year 150 BC. This is a note taken, it's added on to the end of the Septuagint translation of Job. Here's what they thought. I don't know that this is right, but this is the oldest extant commentary on who Job was. This man is described in the Syriac book as living in the land of Ausis, on the borders of Idumea, that's Edom, modern day the country of Jordan, and Arabia. So think where the country of Jordan has a border with the country of Saudi Arabia, and that's about where they thought he lived. And his name before was Jobab. So they connect him to this guy in the book of Genesis, and whose name is Jobab. And having taken an Arabian wife, he begot a son whose name was Enon, and he himself was the father of Zara, was the son of his father Zara, one of the sons of Esau, and of his mother Basra, so that he was the fifth from Abram. Now, whether that's true, I don't know. But that's about the time that he lived. It seems to be, just based on many different factors, such as the fact that they measure their wealth in camels and things. He's probably living at the time of either Abraham, Isaac, or Jacob, maybe even when Joseph is in Egypt. So in about that 200-300 year period, the time of the patriarchs. But he's not an Israelite. This is also strange in the Old Testament. Almost all the books, except for this one, and Ecclesiastes, and sort of Proverbs, but Proverbs not as much. All the other books are focused on the nation of Israel, but this is just about some guy who wasn't even an Israelite. So that is interesting. And then finally, where's this land of Uz where he lived? And we don't know. It could have been up in the north in Aram. It could have been in Seir in the land of Edom, alongside the sons of Esau. This would be, again, kind of in the Syria, northern Saudi Arabia region. So that's all we can really say about his name and his place that he was living and the time. So time would be approximately between, let's say, 2000 and 1500 BC. Well, no, 1500 is too late. Probably 2000 and 1800, or maybe 1750 BC. That's about when this happens. Any questions on the introductory stuff? Try to do that quick because it's not really, certain. I'm just going to double check that I can see who's here. I'm going to participants.
So
Yeah.
maybe you're going to get to this, but if Job was not an Israelite, do we know how he knew of God and was a believer?
Well, no, we don't. But if this, there's this theory that he came from the family of Abraham and maybe from the people of Esau. So that would be a way he would know about the true God. Also, at about this time, if you remember Melchizedek, you heard of him. So he's this mysterious priest living in Salem. He's a priest of God Most High. Abraham gives him a tenth, a tithe of everything he owns, or no, everything he won in this battle. And so we know that there were believers around that the Bible doesn't mention. So it's kind of a mystery. And then how did this get written down, and how did it end up in the Bible? Some people connect it to this guy Elihu that we will meet in the latter half of the chapter 36. And he may have been an Israelite. So this was a big event, and it drew people from all over to come see Job, and some of them may have been related to the Israelites. And maybe that's how this got passed down. The other question is, was this written down in Job's lifetime, or was it written down later? And there's no way to say, really. I think it could have been either, but there's a lot of detail in the dialogue that would make you think it's got to have some contemporary sources used. Any other questions on this introductory stuff?
Well, sure, but
Yeah.
so I've studied a bunch of that in the history before,
Uh-huh.
and just wondering, so do we have any idea how like, Job knew how to make sacrifices for his children? Because
Oh, yeah.
later on he goes like, oh, in case my children sin,
Yeah, how did-
an offering to God to, any kind of like a pre-Levitical,
Mhm.
sacrifice system that,
Yeah.
you don't really, like kind of like Melchizedek, they don't have much real hard facts about him. Do we know how he would know like what sacrifice was acceptable?
Yeah, so, and we're going to get to this in the very first verses, verse 4 and 5. How does he know to make sacrifices to the Lord? How did ancient people know that in general? Why does Job know that? Well, it's just, I got a PowerPoint on this, but I don't think it would be wise to dig it out and pull it up. But all ancient cultures made animal sacrifices of some sort. And it just seems to have been written into the human heart that this is something to do to appease whatever gods you worship. And in the Bible, you can maybe even trace it back to Adam and Eve. And Adam and Eve, when God forgives them, he takes an animal and clothes them with its skin. Well, obviously, he killed that animal, and its kind of death then covers for them. And that's at the end of Genesis chapter 3. And then we read about sacrifices already in Noah's time, right? So evidently, the exact origins aren't written out, but it just seems assumed that people kind of realize, shed blood, and atone for sin and somehow make up for it. So then that's codified in Leviticus. It's not like the idea of sacrificing wasn't new, but it was how they did it specifically that was new in the Bible. All right, well, that gets us now into the next section. So maybe I'll ask a volunteer. We're going to look at verses 1 through 5, and I have 2 questions to ask, and then we can talk about anything else. Would anybody be willing to read verses 1 through 5?
I will.
All right, thank you.
There was a man in the country of Uz named Job. He was a man of complete integrity who feared God and turned away from evil. He had 7 sons and 3 daughters. His estate included 7,000 sheep and goats, 3,000 camels, 500 yoke of oxen, 500 female donkeys, and a very large number of servants. Job was the greatest man among all the people of the East. His sons used to take turns having banquets at their homes. They would send an invitation to their 3 sisters to eat and drink with them. Whenever a round of banqueting was over, Job would send his children and purify them. Send for his children and purify them, rising early in the morning to offer burnt offerings for all of them. For Job thought, perhaps my children have sinned, having cursed God in their heart. This was Job's regular practice.
Okay, thanks. Hey, by the way, what translation is that?
That is a CSB.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's a good one. Good. I'm looking at an NIV just because that's what we have here. So if you heard some of the small differences, you realize that basically translations are almost completely the same. And it is true, though, they're female donkeys in the Hebrew. So the NIV doesn't have that. Yours did. So yours is better than mine, actually. That's why I asked. I should buy one of those. So the first question there. This is the opening, and it tells us a lot about the book. It's focused on Job and his character and what God does to him, and it really characterizes him. And what important facts do we learn? And there are several, and they're all key.
He's the head of the household, and he's a wealthy farmer.
Well, true. However, you're really downplaying it.
Uh-oh.
Right? He wasn't just a wealthy farmer. He was
a man of character.
Well, yeah. But in terms of his wealth, yeah. So one thing is his wealth, but he wasn't just wealthy. He was the greatest man among all the people of the East. And that phrase doesn't mean his character. It means his wealth. So the richest guy, who's the richest man today?
Elon Musk.
Elon Musk?
Tesla.
Really? He's richer than...
Bezos.
Oh, well, who
There's
cares
some
how?
guy in Dubai.
Some days.
Some guy in
Spies?
Dubai is richer. Yeah.
Elon Musk has spies? I must have misunderstood that.
No,
It doesn't matter.
I said there's somebody in Dubai who is.
Oh, in Dubai. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I got it. That makes more sense. Anyway, yeah. So he's the wealthiest man. That's important. And the assumption in their culture, even if you read the book of Proverbs not carefully, you'd get this impression, is that wealth indicates how much you're blessed by God. I mean, even a lot of people believe that today. It's a kind of a natural assumption. And so that is what people would have thought about him at this time in his society, at least many people. And we'll see his friends had that assumption. And people would not be surprised that God loved him and blessed him, because then what about his character?
Excuse me, just a minor point.
He was
Jeff
upright.
Bezos is, if you Google it.
It is Jeff Bezos.
Yeah, he is the world's wealthiest person for the third year in a row.
Okay. So we have a challenge here. He says he recently was passed, but you know, you get the idea. He's a name that you would know because he's so wealthy. People would talk about him. In Hong Kong, everyone talked about Uncle Lee. There's this guy, his last name was Lee, and they just called him Uncle Lee. And he apparently owned about, 40% of everything in Hong Kong ultimately could be traced to some corporation where he was the majority shareholder. So we tend to know who the rich people are, right? Those names just are out there. So he would have been well known. So this story, it's not far-fetched to think people would have known about it and talked about it. Then in his character, well, blameless, upright, feared God, and shunned evil. And we'll find, that's a pretty strong statement. But then the second question, this anecdote in verses 4 to 5, what does this tell us about Job? Or at least suggest.
Good father.
Okay.
He cares about the spiritual well-being of his kids.
Yeah. I mean, he's a good father. He cares about his kids. Okay. Shared his wealth. So, and we'll see that later. He really did. I mean, his kids are having a feast. It doesn't seem like he's there, but he sacrifices a burnt offering for them because maybe one of them sinned and cursed God in his heart. If I had a member come to me and tell me that they were doing this, what do you think? How do you think I would react? I'd almost be worried they're a little neurotic. They're maybe going overboard,
A little bit overboard, yes.
Yeah,
yes.
but it's not, but it's only meant to show that he's keeping, I mean, his observance of the law and his concern for worshiping God and not offending God is extreme. I mean, to the point that he's not, not really radical, but he's really out there, and something that no one else does. So it's important for us to see that, because in the next section, it's going to claim that there's no one like him. There's no one who fears God as much as him. And that is not hyperbole. It's actually very important for the plot of the book and for this little experiment, if you will, or test case, that he be the most righteous guy there ever was. That's a very important part of this, because it's kind of, when you want to test something, often you'll kind of take an extreme case and see how that works, where things are obvious. And then our lives are not so obvious because we're not quite so righteous and our suffering isn't quite so great, but we can see the principles by applying it to this most righteous man. I don't have this written in the handout, but just for a moment, compare his righteousness to the patriarchs. Those of you who are in the Genesis Bible study, anything strike you when you think about him compared to Abraham or Isaac or Jacob? Just what we know so far.
Well, God always showed their sins and their problems in their lives, and we don't see that with Job.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, he seems to be way more righteous than them in terms of his behavior. And, they did all sorts of wild things and had very notable failings. And it seems like he doesn't. I mean, it seems like he actually fears God much more than they do in terms of practice. So now let's go to the next section, and we'll see God himself make this claim. And there's a lot of mystery in this section. So verses 6 through 12. Any volunteer?
I'll do it if nobody else wants to.
Well, I'm sure everyone wants to. They're just being shy, but you can go ahead.
Well, I wanted to, but I didn't want to step on any toes, so I
Oh,
don't know
no.
about
Well,
being shy.
everyone's
But
going to get a chance.
okay. One day the angels came to present themselves before the Lord, and Satan also came with them. The Lord said to Satan, "Where have you come from?" Satan answered the Lord, "From roaming through the earth and going back and forth in it." Then the Lord said to Satan, "Have you considered my servant Job? There is no one on earth like him. He is blameless and upright, a man who fears God and shuns evil." "Does Job fear God for nothing?" Satan replied. "Have you not put a hedge around him and his household and everything he has? You have blessed the work of his hands, so that his flocks and herds are spread throughout the land. But stretch out your hand and strike everything he has, and he will surely curse you to your face." The Lord said to Satan, "Very well then, everything he has is in your hands, but on the man himself do not lay a finger." Then Satan went out from the presence of the Lord.
Yeah, thanks. So how about the third question? Satan means the accuser. And actually, in the Hebrew, you could make a case for saying you shouldn't translate it Satan. You should translate it the accuser, because it actually says the Satan in Hebrew. And not always in the Bible, but in this book it does. But however you translate it, how does it inform what we see here when we realize his name is the accuser? Yeah, it's fitting. It's exactly what he's doing. He's bringing an accusation against Job.
He's really saying Job is a hypocrite.
Yeah. He won't. He only serves you because you give him stuff. It's the idea. Now, verse 8, I think, is very important for the rest of the book. So now, it's maybe not fair to ask that. You haven't necessarily read the rest of the book or haven't read it recently, but probably some of you have some idea. So why is verse 8 so important for understanding the rest of the book, where he says, where God himself says to Satan, the accuser, "Have you considered Job? There's no one on earth like him. He is blameless and upright, a man who fears God and shuns evil."
Say God set him up.
Okay, yeah. So God knows his character, and he's choosing him on purpose. You know, God is the one who really starts the conversation. It's not Satan. It's so that's it. This is all divine initiated, started. Any other things that are very important about this verse?
God knows his heart.
Yeah, he does. And this is really almost surprising, especially since we stress original sin and that there's nobody without sin. I mean, the language God uses makes it sound like he's got almost no faults. Now, the words blameless and upright, they're not exactly the word righteous. They are usually used in a sense of no public, there's nobody could bring an accusation against you. It doesn't mean that, every thought you have is perfectly pure, but that you haven't broken any rules, you haven't missed any sacrifices, you haven't ever offended someone, so it's still a pretty high bar. All right, and then Satan's accusation against Job, it's harsh there, question 5. And maybe with Job it wasn't true, but isn't it often true that I hear myself. Someone mute yourself. Good, I'm gone. Isn't it true enough that sometimes people do worship God out of convenience? And when it's not convenient, or when it doesn't give us the results we want, we're tempted to stop. I guess you can't really answer that other than yeah, or I disagree. So I won't ask for an answer there, but just think about that. So it's already raising the question, do we worship God because we think we're going to get something from it? And especially in this life. And the answer is no. Like, the book is going to give us a pretty resounding no. And that ties into the New Testament, because Jesus tells us that as Christians, we take up our cross and follow him. that our life is a life of suffering. It's not a life of always getting a quid pro quo. So this introduces really the issue that the friends are going to debate the whole book. And then the last one, 6, the Lord's reply to Satan might make us uncomfortable. What do we learn about suffering and tragedy from these verses? We have to extrapolate a little bit.
Well, the Lord may permit those tests to come into our life.
Yeah, he sure might. He might allow a test to come into our life. Yeah. Any other thoughts?
I think it's also important to note that God might allow it, but he doesn't necessarily do it. Here, Satan is the one who's going to go smacking Job around, and only with God's permission.
Yeah. So Satan, if he's, he acts with God's permission. So God might give him permission to do harm. And it's
He still loves us even though all that's happening.
Yeah. Even though what? The first part, Pat, that you said?
I said he still loves us even though all that is happening.
Yeah. And so, everything going good in your life is not actually a sign that God loves you or doesn't love you,
Right.
And suffering is not a sign that he doesn't. And that's hard for us to get our heads around. And it's easy to say when things are going good, but when you're suffering, it's a whole other thing. So God can allow it. And we're going to see now he allows something pretty devastating. So let's go ahead and look at what happens, verses 13 through 19. And he's going to get 4 rounds of bad news that all happen. And notice they don't just happen on the same day. They happen within the same 5 minutes. As one messenger is still speaking, the other messenger runs in the door. So I don't know how he avoided having a heart attack. I mean, it must have just been total shock. So anybody want to read these 4 messengers? I could get 4 people, but that would be too complicated. So if anybody who's able to use 4 different voices, maybe to represent the 4 servants, or I'll take what I can get. Anybody want to read this in any way that you prefer?
I can read it. I'm
Okay,
not sure
thank you.
do the voices, but
You don't have to,
I can.
but if you did, we'd all enjoy it.
13 to 19, did you say?
Yeah.
Okay. One day, when Job's sons and daughters were feasting and drinking wine at the oldest brother's house, a messenger came to Job and said, "The oxen were plowing and the donkeys were grazing nearby, and the Sabaeans attacked and made off with them. They put the servants to the sword, and I am the only one who has escaped to tell you." While he was still speaking, another messenger came and said, "The fire of God fell from the heavens and burned up the sheep and the servants, and I am the only one who has escaped to tell you." While he was still speaking, another messenger came and said, "The Chaldeans formed 3 raiding parties and swept down on your camels and made off with them. They put the servants to the sword, and I am the only one who has escaped to tell you." While he was still speaking, yet another messenger came and said, "Your sons and daughters were feasting and drinking wine at the oldest brother's house, when suddenly a mighty wind swept in from the desert and struck the 4 corners of the house. It collapsed on them, and they are dead. And I'm the only
Okay,
one."
so, is that it? Yeah, that's it. And no, and I'm the only one to escape to tell you. Thank you. So actually, I'll ask question 8 first. So what does Job have left?
Himself.
Everybody gets this wrong. He's got 4 servants left. Things aren't hopeless. Oh, yeah. So it's true, right? They're there. They're alive. I don't know what happened. He can't pay them anymore. He's not going to be able to feed them. All right. So, but now let's go through the 4 rounds. And the first round, basically, he loses his
plowing animals.
Yep, oxen and donkeys, and they're stolen by some people, and also a bunch of servants who were watching them. They're killed as well. So oxen, donkeys, servants in a raiding attack. And then round 2. Now notice the details of this. This is not normal.
Fire from God fell from the sky and burned up the sheep.
Yeah. So he loses his sheep and servants, watching them, to fire from heaven. Now, how does fire from heaven burn a sheep? I mean, lightning might strike a sheep. This is very strange. So this isn't just, a natural disaster. This is a divine type thing. Now, I guess it's Satan doing it, working, I guess, with God's permission, but this would be very strange, and very, very shocking. So it's not like they're just taken away by traitors or raiders. We all know about the raiders. All right, number 3, what happened in the third round?
Camels are carried off and the
Camel.
servants are killed.
Yep. Camels, servants, and this time again, it's another raiding party. The Chaldeans this time, people living in the Babylon area. And round 4.
His children.
Yeah, his children. And notice God does leave his wife alive, because in this case, she ends up, probably doing more harm than good, that she ends up we'll see in chapter 2, she ends up really tempting him to just give up and commit suicide, basically. So, yeah, children gone, and you can't replace your children. It's interesting when God gives him a new family and new wealth at the end of the book, he gives him double all his possessions, but the same number of children, kind of like a way of saying you can't really make up for the loss of a child. But then 7, this is key to think about. What various evidence makes it clear this was supernatural?
No. Divine.
They all happen concurrently.
Yeah. What's that? He said the divine order, right?
Divine orbital strike.
Oh, orbital strike. Yes, exactly. Yeah.
Elisha grade stuff on the
Mhm.
bigger.
Yep. Yeah. So the fire from heaven is a giveaway. What other things? I didn't hear whoever was speaking on Zoom.
I said they concurrently happened.
Yes, so that they're happening at the same moment. And we shouldn't take that for granted. I mean, that's very strange, What are the odds? Anything else?
It was total destruction, not just some of the camels or some of the sheep.
Yeah.
Everything's gone.
Yeah, in just a moment. So people are going to see this, and what are they going to think? When his friends assume God is mad at you, before we become too judgmental, what would you think? I mean, what if this really happened to you, somebody that was a successful business person or doctor or something, and you find out their business burned to the ground and everybody died and their family members were killed and their house blew up in a gas leak, and this all happened in the same day. It would be hard not to draw some sort of conclusion, and to speculate what's going on with this person. I mean, for that to be a coincidence just seems like a lot. So we can understand why the friends are having trouble. They're trying to justify it or make sense of it, even though that doesn't get them off the hook. So this book is setting up a test case, basically, even though we have one more chapter to go with the, it's going to get even worse because he's going to be covered in boils, but we'll go through that part quickly next week. But basically, the most something and something person on earth, and I would say there's a lot of words you could use here. I would say righteous and pious. You could also say wealthy, but I don't think that's the most important thing, because he's righteous in terms of his ethics are all perfect, or he's righteous, upright and blameless, but pious in his devotion to God, so those two aspects. He experiences the most devastating tragedy or loss, fill with whatever word there, in a way that is obviously from God, or at least allowed by God, even if Satan's the one doing it. So this is an extreme case, but it's a good case to then test the principle. Why is he serving God? What does this mean? And it's interesting, we know at the beginning why this is all happening. And Job and his friends are going to spend the whole book arguing about why this is happening. And none of them ever comes close to thinking this was to prove to Satan that Job really loved God. Nobody would think that. And of course, it wasn't just to prove something to Satan, because we know ultimately it was to have the story preserved and written down and learn something from it. But nobody at that time would have ever even thought of that reason. So we don't always know why suffering comes, but this is an important test case God sets up. And here's a note just to keep this tucked away as we look at the dialogues. The fate of Job's children and God's punishment of the wicked will come up several times in the course of the dialogue. So they talk about these topics a lot. And I can't help but wonder if Job, when he talks about the wicked and why God never punishes the wicked, if he's thinking of some of these people who just raided and took all his stuff. So they're very real issues here. It's that Job's dealing with. It's not just abstract philosophy. So then wow, I'm sticking to my proposed timeline. I'm so proud of myself, but now that I've said that, we're going to get behind. Yes.
I have a question in
Go
that
ahead.
last blank after the word devastating.
Yeah, tragedy
what to
or
put in there. Okay.
tragedy, disaster, maybe. You could use the word suffering too.
Okay. Thank you.
Mhm.
This is God's punishment.
So then 20 to 22.
On the wicked.
Any volunteer? Someone who sounds, I don't know, how did Job sound when he said this? You want to give it some thought, maybe?
Mournful.
Okay, Pat, let's give it a go. Sound mournful.
Oh. Okay.
Yeah.
At this time, Job got up and tore his robe and shaved his head. Then he fell to the ground in worship and said, "Naked I came from my mother's womb, and naked I will depart. The Lord gave, and the Lord has taken away. May the name of the Lord be praised." In all this, Job did not sin by charging God with wrongdoing.
Yeah. So then it's an open-ended question. Evaluate Job's reaction to all this tragedy.
He still loved God. He didn't blame him for anything.
Yeah. And in case we weren't sure, he did not sin, charging God with any wrongdoing. He didn't give up faith. He took it stoically, we might say, except for that kind of implies a stoic philosophy that doesn't believe in God. But yeah, he took it in its stride and trusted God. I'm sure emotionally it was not easy for him. We shouldn't imagine this wasn't a huge blow. And maybe he's even kind of in shock at this point. And maybe that's why his severe reaction comes later. Maybe he's, at first in shock and
Probably, yeah.
something like that. But we'll talk more about that
But
in chapter 3. Yeah.
it just describes him tearing his robe.
It just describes him what?
We can't hear you when you look away from the computer.
Oh, that's right. Yeah. You guys had that problem before, I remember. Your microphone only picks it up if it's just like this. When you do that, for some reason, it doesn't get it.
He says he shaved his head, he tore his clothes, and he fell to the ground. I mean, that's just a simple description of what really had to be going on with him.
Yeah.
He could have been, crying, and maybe he was yelling, and who knows what his reaction would be.
Yeah. Well, tearing his robe, shaving his head, and actually all those things were much more normal in their society. So to us, none of those is normal, but we have the habit of wearing black when someone dies. And for them, tearing your robe and shaving your head would kind of be like wearing black. Meanwhile, falling on the ground was actually typical for when they worshiped. They would actually, the word for worship in Hebrew is literally fall with your face to the ground. And there's every bit of evidence that's actually what they did. Yep. A comment there?
I said they were wailers. They cried.
Yeah. And they would even have hired wailers and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Like the whole village would come. They're not really hired, but that was like your job in the village.
Yeah,
You'd be village crier, and when someone died, part of your job was to show up and make a lot of noise. So very different, obviously, culture than ours. 4,000 years ago, there's a lot of gap. It's amazing we can even read these stories and not have more confusion than we do when you think about the cultural gap and the time gap.
Well,
So
what
then
I
he-
think of
yeah.
is, that whole part of, he came with nothing. And he has nothing, nothing's changed. So he did not see all this wealth and all this accumulation and all this wonderful family stuff
Mhm.
as this is mine. I own it. What do you want to say? I earned it.
Mhm.
None of that stuff. It's like, that's all peripheral.
Yeah.
He's just a man.
Yeah, it's really a pretty deep understanding. He came into this world with nothing and he's going with nothing.
And I think between those two verses, it kind of, in 2 verses, gives the lie to the entire prosperity gospel.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Not, oh, I love God, so we'll do this stuff. Or, if you really had faith, you wouldn't be poor and destitute. No.
Yeah.
Job was the wealthiest man.
Mhm.
Now he's got nothing, and that does not change his, his regard for God, his
Yeah.
relationship to God. He understands his place in relation to God
Mhm.
and God's sovereignty over creation.
Yeah.
And then it confirms that through all this, he didn't sin. So his attitude there was correct.
Yeah. So we got to give him some credit. I mean, not, the goal is never to really praise people, but at the same time, he's got a remarkable attitude, and he will break down and accuse God either in chapter 6 or definitely by chapter 9. However, look how much it takes. I mean, there's going to be a whole nother round of Satan asking to harm him because this one didn't work. And then it's not until his friends, the people who are supposed to comfort him instead turn on him. That's when he finally starts to have his fill. So yeah, and I don't know if you heard all that, but it definitely shows the prosperity gospel. Just there's nothing biblical about it, going back to the Old Testament, but also in the New. So, all right. And then the last question, what does this say about Satan's accusations earlier? Yeah, Satan was wrong. Satan said, if you stretch out your hand and strike everything he has, and he will surely curse you to your face. So Satan already is wrong. We don't have to wait till the next chapter to see that, but he's going to keep trying. Satan is the false accuser. Maybe we should add that word. His accusations are, usually incorrect, but doesn't matter. I shouldn't admit this. So sometimes I listen to weird stuff on YouTube. I was listening to a testimony by a guy who claims to be a former Satanist. Now, I don't know if it's true or not. I mean, people can just make stuff up. But he said that when he became a Satanist, he had to sign something in blood that said Jesus died for other people, but he did not die for me. And it sounded, at least Satan does lie. That sounds like the kind of lie he'd say. And it's not true, but, I'm not forgiven. That general thing, whether you saw it on YouTube or not, a lot of times we feel that way, and yet it's not true. But Satan accuses us. So we see him doing that, and yet we see that God had really blessed Job with this incredible piety. And not that he hadn't sinned, but he hadn't in any way, but he had not charged God with wrongdoing. And that would be hard to lose all that. So then next week, we'll see chapter, I think 2 and 3. 2 is kind of repetitive with this chapter. It's the same heavenly scene, so we can go through it faster. And 3 then is Job's cursing his birthday and basically saying he wants to die. And there's kind of we'll debate there. Does he sin or not? Is he just expressing his grief, or is he already kind of ever so slightly and subtly insulting God and saying God didn't do a good job when he created him? So that's what we get. And it's probably someone were struggling with suicide and wanted to find something, or not, with thinking about it or whatever, and wanted to find something in the Bible where it deals with this issue. Job chapter 3, which we're going to look at next week, would be I'd say the lengthiest part of the Bible that touches on this issue. He doesn't say he wants to kill himself per se. He just says he wishes he was dead. So it's not exactly the same thing. And then Job's friends are going to arrive, and Satan disappears. That's kind of interesting. Even after he gets the whole thing going, then he's just gone for the rest of the book, and he never comes back. And it doesn't say this explicitly, but I think Satan has figured out how to keep tormenting Job, and that's through his friends, because it's his friends that really get him to break down. So any final thoughts or questions there? Almost kept it to 45 minutes, but close enough. As long as we're in the final discussion by now.
When we do Zoom, everybody looks so serious, so everybody smile.
Yeah,
You can't see everybody.
you're right. Yeah, we're having much more fun here in person, I can assure you. We got room for a few more.
And
I
take
think.
away the paper so we can see everybody, please.
Take away the paper.
Yeah,
We can't
your
see
study guide.
everybody.
I
Yeah.
see,
You
I
can only
see.
see four
Sure,
people.
Oh, there
Hey.
you got it, okay.
There's half a Kayla. There you are.
All right, well, I won't in this evening study, take prayer requests and spend, 20 minutes on that like we often do for Thursday Bible study. But if anyone does have a prayer request, send it along and I'll include it in the weekly email and the Sunday worship. But any final thoughts anybody has or
Thank you.
comments?
No,
Yeah.
Good to
yeah,
see
glad to get this
everybody.
going. Tell people if they want to join, they're still welcome. There's always room on Zoom, it's unlimited. So, all right. God bless your evening and great to see everybody, especially the,
You too.
people we hadn't seen for a while, the Dixons, although it looks like maybe they're gone already. So,
No, but they're
No,
still
still
up there.
there.
oh, they are.
Hey.
Okay. Got it. Well, great. We'll see you next week. Take care.
All right,
Okay,
bye-bye.
God bless.
thank you.
Yep.
Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.